Our concluding panel is on transitioning thoroughbred racehorses to second careers. And the panel is made up of Ali Conrad, who is Executive Director of Cantor in Mid-Atlantic, Barbara Luna, who's Program Administrator of Turning for Home, Diana Picalsi is Executive Director of the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, Dr. James Smith is with the Kentucky Equine Humane Center, and Kim Smith is Executive Director of Second Stride. And to moderate the panel, we'll call back to the podium Mike Ziegler, Executive Director of the NTRA Safety and Integrity Alliance.
Yeah. Thanks again, Ed. I'm going to start with a couple of comments of my own and then get into having each of the members of the panel make some describing their organizations. At some tracks and in some racing jurisdictions, taking care of our horses when their racing careers are over is as fundamentally important as any other part of the business. Programs like the ones at Suffolk Downs, Finger Lakes Thoroughbred Adoption Program in New York, Lope in Texas, and Karma in California, to name only a few, are terrific steps in the right direction. However, until programs like these are the rule and not the exceptions, at all tracks and in all jurisdictions, there's much work to be done in this area. The sheer fact that this panel is a part of the Welfare and Safety Summit is another step in the right direction. The industry clearly is beginning to recognize that this is a shared issue among all facets of the industry, including tracks, owners, trainers, jockeys, and even fans. Taking care of our horses after they are done racing is becoming a priority for many. There's general consensus among people involved with aftercare organizations that the common denominator of all successful programs is that the principal organizers all share common characteristics, namely a ton of energy, determination, and commitment. Successful organizations also work closely with tracks and horsemen's groups that have institutional commitment to the cause of taking care of horses after their racing careers are over. Without commitment from all the parties, organizations are simply setting themselves up for failure. The panelists joining us today are key players of some of the most successful programs in racing, and without doubt, they share the energy, determination, and commitment to run successful organizations. Their organizations are all similar in that they share endless affinity for the horse, and different in that they have different means to meet common ends. In that regard, I will ask each of them to give a few minutes overview of what distinguishes their group from others, and in doing so, please tell us what differentiates your organization from others. Why don't we start on this end, Kim?
Well, Second Stride, we're based here in Louisville, Kentucky, so just down the road. We are an all-volunteer-based program, including the board members. We were founded from scratch. We have no patrons, no seed money, so we have clawed our way up to a successful program. We are pro-racing. We try to work with the racing community, both the horsemen, the horse owners, breeders, and the tracks. We believe in trying to focus on prevention, trying to quickly get the horses transitioned into their new careers directly from the racetracks has become our focus, to be able to reach the most horses. Hopefully you could still hear me. And we also work with racetrack trainers and jockeys and exercise riders. They visit our farm and help get our horses started in their new retraining program. And then when we get them assessed and evaluated, then we get upper-level show riders to come out and start teaching them for their new skill sets. We were one of the first programs to start a training division, and it's been quite successful for us in our adoptions. And I think that's about it that I can say about the program. So, if you...
Great. Thanks, Dr. Smith.
The Kentucky Equine Humane Center celebrated our 3rd birthday in April, and we take in all breeds of horses, although Thoroughbreds make up slightly over 70%. Our mission statement is to provide humane treatment and shelter while working as a clearinghouse to seek adoptive homes for all of Kentucky's unwanted equines, regardless of breed, to educate the public and raise awareness of the problem of the unwanted horse, and to serve as a model for other humane centers. As of early this morning, we had taken in 556 horses. We have adopted out 237 of these horses, and I might say that our adoptive policy is pretty stringent. We require that to have a letter or at least a phone call from the adoptive person's veterinarian and farrier telling us that this person is responsible, that they have the facilities, the wherewithal to take care of a horse, and they have the knowledge to take care of a horse. And we also do a 6-month and a 12-month checkup to make sure that they are fulfilling that policy. We have them sign quite a long contract before they can then take a horse. And part of that contract is that if they no longer can use the horse isn't fulfilling their needs, they don't have the money for whatever reason, that horse must be returned to us. If anything else happens, there's a $10,000 fine. Unfortunately, I mentioned all the horses that we have adopted out, and the ones that we have not been adopted out, many of them have to be euthanized. Some of them need to for humane reasons because they're suffering inhumanely. We do have a policy of spending up to $400 on treating a horse, and our veterinary care is donated or done at a very reduced price, so we're able to help out a number of the horses. Many of the horses we receive are in great shape and can have great futures as a second career. We do not have any policy on slaughter and will not have one either, because we have friends and clients on both sides of that issue, and it's a political football that we're not going to touch. We would be dead in the water if it weren't for the tremendous number of wonderful volunteers that we have. With a very small staff, we can't begin to do it, but we have unbelievably good volunteers. Just recently, early this year, we got a grant to retrain thoroughbreds, and we started that a couple of months ago. We take 7 at a time. Out of the first 7, one horse just didn't make the grade and had to be retired. Out of the other 6, 5 were adopted within a few days. We're just finishing up on our second group of 7, and so it's a little too early to see what's going to happen then. But we really think the retraining part of our mission will do nothing but grow in the future. I guess that's...
Great. Thanks, Dr. Smith. Diana?
Thank you, Mike. My name is Diana Pekulski, and I'm the Executive Director of the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. We started about 30 years ago. Before, there was a lot of talk about retirement and any talk about adoption of retired racehorses. We currently care for 1,235 horses at 18 farms. The majority of our horses are unsound for riding. They are pasture sound, but not sound for retraining and riding. So we try to find jobs for those horses, and I think that's probably what we're the most well known for. We have 9 farms that are at correctional facilities where we teach the inmates, both men and women, a vocational training program in horse care and horsemanship, and they get the benefit, the emotional benefit of taking care of the horses. They also get job training, and we get a really good story for racing and really good care for our ex-racehorses. Many of the horses that come right off the track will go to one of the correctional facility farms, and then when that horse has been rehabilitated by the inmate program and the horse is possibly sound, we'll send it to one of our retraining centers. Probably our biggest one is here at the Kentucky Horse Park, called the Maker's Mark Secretariat Center. We also have retraining centers in Florida and in Virginia, and we will then get the horse ready for somebody to adopt in a way that we think will make the chances of the adoption being successful most likely, because we spend a lot of time with the horse, we teach them as many things as we possibly can, and really try to identify what that horse is best suited for before adopting it out. We work with a number of tracks who have tried to develop programs where every horse that retires from that track and can't race anywhere else finds a home with the TRF or with another organization that we might work with. And the funding comes through various elements throughout the racetrack, whether it's the marketing budget or through the riders giving a percentage of what they earn or amount per start from the owners. And we think that's really been successful and has shown the industry that these programs can work and that it is achievable to say every horse that races at a track in the United States can go someplace safe. And oftentimes it has to be put down, but at least it's being handled in a safe and humane way. I think that's probably it.
Okay, great. Barbara?
Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Luner from Turning for Home, which is the Pennsylvania Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association Racehorse Retirement Program at Philadelphia Park Racetrack. First of all, I have to say that I take any opportunity I can to come down to Lexington, Kentucky, because I love it down here. But I'm especially honored and feel very great to be among this distinguished group of horsemen and women that have invited here today, especially because our program is only 2 years old, and I do believe it's one of the first in the nation that is supported almost solely by our racetrack and by the horsemen's group and the racetrack itself. We opened our doors in May 2008 to start taking in horses just from Philadelphia Park. I work only for the Pennsylvania Thoroughbreds Horsemen's Association, which is like the HPPA, only we call it the PTHA. So I am the only hired employee. We are registered as a nonprofit. We run our business as a strictly business-like nonprofit organization. And I always say that the best and worst things about my job are being located right on the racetrack. My office is right on the backstretch. I'm a horsewoman from a long time ago. I trained horses. I did television for a number of years at many racetracks. And I love racing, and I love racehorses and the people that are associated with them. The best thing about being at the racetrack is that I can have contact with the people that take care of these horses every day, that as our location of being at a racetrack lends itself to me being able to count on the veterinarians, the shippers, and a lot of different people who will donate their time and energy for us. The bad thing about being on the racetrack is I take in at least 5 horses a week, and that's been the average number of horses since we started in May 2008. So far, we've taken, as of last count, which changes every day, believe it or not, 410 horses off of the Philadelphia Park Racetrack and removed them and either safely and humanely euthanized them or found adoptive homes for them. The way that we work through our funding, first of all, our funding comes $50,000 a year from the Horsemen's Association, the PTHA. We get money also from Philadelphia Park Racetrack, who has verbally agreed to give us a matching fund every year. The owners have been wonderful about agreeing to give $10 every time one of their horses starts, and the jockeys have been very much on board with this by giving $10 for every win and $5 for every second. Now, a lot of racetracks have seemed to have problems with the bookkeeping associated with that, but Philadelphia Park Management has their bookkeeper send Turning for Home a check every month with that much money, so therefore I can create a budget and I know how many horses I can move from the racetrack every month. It's not perfect, and our only limitations are with funding. So therefore, we do a lot of outside fundraising as well, but the bulk of our money comes right from the racetrack and the people, which gives us our tagline, Philadelphia Park is proud to take care of its own. What we've done with the horses, I run it as from the administrative end, so I keep careful records on every horse. I make sure the veterinary records are come in with the horse, and we have each horse evaluated, kind of in a triage situation. Horses that are 100% sound, obviously are very easy to adopt. We have no problems with those. Horses that need rehab are in the second group, and horses that cannot go on to a second career as a riding horse are usually given at least 30 days to recover and step up to the plate, but if they cannot become rideable or are not going to be able to go on to a second career, then we humanely euthanize them. And this has to be done because there's just no funding and no place for these horses in this kind of economy. Just as you had mentioned before, we're not pro-slaughter, we're not anti-slaughter. I'd like to say that we're pro-horse and we're for the best of the racetrack equine. Our program has been very successful. The only problems that we do have are perhaps our waiting list sometimes gets long, and after talking to all the people here and you listening to the trainers and what their ideas are, you know that when your horses are not racing, the racing secretary and the stall manager wants to get your horse out of the racetrack. So I do have a lot of pressure, as do the trainers, to get the horses off the racetrack as soon as they are ready to be retired. We take any horse. We don't limit it to their soundness issues. Our criteria is that the horse has to be based at Philadelphia Park and based with the trainer who is stable at Philadelphia Park for at least 6 months out of the year. One of the reasons that we have so many horses is that our racetrack runs 12 months out of the year. We don't have breaks. It's the same group of horsemen for 12 months out of the year, and we have a lot of lower-level claiming races, and the trickle-down effect of horses that maybe used to race at bigger tracks, a lot of them do end up at Philadelphia Park. We are able to do this and do well with this program mainly because of the Pennsylvania Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, which is the group that hired me to do this after we carefully put together a budget plan and a business plan. And also we are able to do this because of all the support from our horsemen. So I think that any racetrack can do this. I've been contacted by many other racetracks to hand over our business plan. I don't know that any other track has been able to do it with the administrative work based at the racetrack, but I feel like that definitely is the way to go. We put our money into caring for the horses by working with 2 other approved nonprofit organizations. We would love to work with other people, but our nonprofits that we work with, we give them a one-time donation per horse, and we work very closely with both of those groups, and we use those 2 groups only right now because they do things the way we like. There's an application process for adopters, there's follow-up involved, there's a no auction right of first refusal contract that goes with each horse, and the horses are given plenty of time off if they need it. So that's pretty much how we have worked out Turning for Home, and I hope we have many more good years ahead of us.
Thanks. At the end of the table, Allie, thank you.
Hi. First, I want to say thank you for having us here. I'm honored to be here among all these people who I consider my peers. I am the executive director of Cantor Mid-Atlantic. We've been in existence for 11 years, and in that time, we have moved from 1 racetrack into 7 racetracks. Nationally, Cantor is present in many different states, and to date, we have stopped counting at 10,000 horses placed into new homes directly from the racetrack. Our program is a little different. We began with a track listing program many years ago where our volunteer base would go to the racetracks every Saturday morning or whatever morning they selected, go around, talk to the owners and trainers about their retiring racehorses or horses who are falling down through the ranks who might have a soundness issue, who don't have much more of a future in racing, and talk to them about selling them to the sport horse public. A sound thoroughbred is a wanted commodity to this day. I have a list of people who will take a lovely sound gelding that just a mile long. So that's a big part of our program. The track listing program is hugely successful. My volunteers are in huge demand every time they go to the racetrack. They are there for 5 hours every Saturday morning at each of these racetracks and list anywhere from 10 to 30 horses a day. These horses are then listed on our website as a free classified service, and the general horse buying public who's looking for a sport horse or broodmare or pleasure horse can then contact the owner or trainer or the contact for the horse and purchase it directly. That's the first part of our program. The second part of our program is we call it Phase 2, which is a donation program where horses can be donated to the program. We focus on retraining and rehoming. We are not a retirement facility, and like Barbara, we have a euthanasia policy. We feel that if a horse will not be sound for a second career, we do not have the funding, the space, the time, or the manpower to maintain those horses. So we do euthanize horses that have catastrophic injuries or who cannot become sound to be in a second career. I won't go too long because I know we're a little short on time, and I hope that we will be able to extend our time a little bit because this is such an important thing. And I also hope all the people who left earlier left because it's cold in here, not because this isn't important. Anyhow, I'll just stick to that so we can get to all of our questions. But again, I'm just really happy to be here and thrilled that it's part of this summit. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm going to start out with a couple of questions. Why don't you take this, Allie? What do you think the best approach for an owner or a trainer to find a home for their what's the best approach for an owner and a trainer to find a new home for their racehorse?
It depends on the situation, actually. If you have a sound horse, first of all, talk to your racetrack veterinarians, talk to your stable manager if you don't have a program in place. More and more there are racetracks that, we are contacted daily with people who want to start programs at racetracks. So find out if there's a program in place. Find out if your horse can be advertised with a program like Canner. Canner is one of many. We like to think that we kind of spawned a whole bunch of different programs in different places that do the same thing we did. If you have an unsound horse, you really need to evaluate what you want to do with that animal. It costs us thousands of dollars to rehabilitate something like a slab fracture. That's an $8,000 rehabilitation for us. You need to, if you're an owner of a horse, you need to commit to that horse, pay for its rehabilitation, either donate it to somebody who can rehabilitate it with the funding that it will cost to rehabilitate the horse, or you need to euthanize the horse. So really, this policy of ours has kind of been formed because of the economic situation. 5 years ago, we weren't in the situation we could find homes for horses who were unsound. That is no longer the case. I'm sure TRF can tell you that. They have just tons of unsound, unplaceable horses.
Sort of a follow-up to that, and I'll ask Dr. Smith this question, but what is the criteria for putting a horse down for euthanasia?
Are you asking me?
I'm going to ask Dr. Smith.
I'm sorry.
Okay, asking you.
Go ahead.
There is not any exacting criteria. If the horse is suffering and we feel like that cannot be quickly helped, and so that the horse is reasonably sound but comfortable, there's no question that horse is going to be euthanized right away. Again, I said our veterinary services are either donated or greatly reduced. So that $400 maximum that we spend on a horse goes a lot further than it would for most any other place. But if it's going to require extensive surgery, a lot of things, that horse is going to be euthanized. I think I failed to mention earlier that we do have a farm, and we have a maximum of 55 horses that we can keep at the farm. And so if we're full and more horses come in, unfortunately somebody's got to go. our euthanasia policy is set up by, we have a veterinary committee. I'm a veterinarian, but I'm not on that committee. We have an excellent veterinary committee, and they make the decision on all the euthanasias, and I've been very well satisfied with it.
Does anybody else have anything to add to the question? Barbara, go ahead.
I'd just like to say, for our euthanasia policy, because we're 2 years old, I will admit freely that we went through a lot of growing pains when we started the program. When I originally made up the business plan and I worked on it with the executive director, Mike Valesi, we anticipated perhaps 75 horses per year that we would be able to take care of. I had worked for a number of rescue organizations and nonprofits prior to that. I thought that sounded like a pretty good number, and when they started pouring in at 4 horses per week, we soon realized that this was going to be a pretty big issue. Initially, we started keeping the horses for at least 6 months. Then as we got further on going with the program, we had quite a few veterinarians that jumped on board to help us. So it's not just a decision that we make lightheartedly. We have 2 racetrack veterinarians who work right on the track and who actually know many of these horses anyway. And we also work with a very well-renowned equine surgeon, that's Dr. Patty Hogan, who insists that she wants us to send us all of our x-rays so she can help evaluate these horses. Patty also has done surgery for us for a very reduced rate on horses that will be able to go on and be rideable if that surgery is done. But if she and our 2 veterinarians from the racetrack shake their heads and say this horse will never be sound, then those are the experts that we work with. And it's never a decision that we make lightly.
Sure, Dr. Smith?
The question you'd asked a little earlier about what do you tell someone to do with their horse when they can't keep it anymore, we have run into 2 different groups in Kentucky that are really a phony outfit, and so people need to check it out before they give them the horse. In these cases, they had no place, they didn't have any plans to do anything but send the horses straight to slaughter. So you do need to check out the organization that you may be donating your horse to.
Does anybody on the panel have a resource with which you could check out those organizations? If I'm an owner or trainer, I've got a horse, how do I know whether it's legitimate and it's not somebody going straight to slaughter?
You should probably use GuideStar, really.
What? Can you?
It's a web-based program called GuideStar, where you can look for an organization and see that it's properly run with the board of directors and that it files its returns and does what it needs to do. And just to go back to your euthanasia question, it seems like the TRF is a little bit unique in this. We use the AAEP standard for making a determination as to whether or not a horse should be euthanized.
Kim?
I have something to add to that. And as far as with the owners and what they can do to help, what I'm hoping maybe from this, if this seed could get planted, this idea of maybe racetracks hiring a liaison position for someone that could network, has a good relationship with the track trainers at that racetrack or the surrounding training facilities, even if it could be expanded. But this person would help find what horses are coming available, get their statistics, and then help network out to area charities, within their region and know about all the charities in their region. So that research would already be done. And they could also help network and find free van services, because that, for us, our facility's not directly on the track, and it can get costly vanning all the horses. But it would be great if there was a liaison at every racetrack, on every backside, that could relate well to all the different types of trainers and staff members there, as well as relate well to the organizations, the charity organizations that they would then network those horses to.
Okay, let me ask you a question, changing topics a little bit here. Tell us how you find the marketplace that there is for off-the-track thoroughbreds.
Well, for us, I have a background in showing horses. so of every different kind, from Western to English to dressage and eventing. So I have a wealth of contacts, and I think that's why I was sort of founded Second Stride as instead of stray dogs, I found stray horses. So just everybody kept bringing them to me because they knew I had a bunch of contacts. And then, of course, the web and its resources, that was wonderful. And it used to be able to really network for horses. Now it's become much more complicated, as they've mentioned, for finding compromised horses' homes. But basically, we work out on the web to reach out to other programs, and our program likes to work directly with trainers. A lot of our adoptions are repeat adoptions because we have a policy where we have an adoption application that's pretty strict and stringent, but we do allow adopters, they can resell their horses. So if they adopt a horse and they this trainer put 6 months of time into this horse, they're never going to recoup the amount of time they have in that horse. All the hours that they spend with it. And if their student then wants to be an appropriate match for that horse, we allow that. So we do need to know where the horse is transitioned to. We need their contact information. All that's kept tracked, and we do our adoption application and contract has several points in it that is lifetime binding for the horse. So if you do replace the horse, then you have to make the next owner aware of these points. So in that, we try to work with a lot of trainers, both the race trainers and the show trainers, so that the horses get the proper socialization. That first 6 months is so critical for them to get professionally started in a very quick manner. If they need letdown period, that's done, but as far as having competent hands and not just going straight to an amateur. Unfortunately, a professional rider could have their pick of any horse they want for free, so that's why we formed those policies, was just based over research.
Anybody else want to add anything on creating the market? Diana?
We have a website called the Thoroughbred Adoption Network, where all organizations can list their ex-race horses that are up for adoption, and it gets an amazing number of hits. We've also started to do some marketing of ex-race horses that are doing well in eventing or in the show world, and it's so interesting to me to see them not really, blossoming in their second careers until they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 15 years old. And so I think it's important that people who own racehorses and train racehorses and manage racehorses should be thinking about that horse's potential when it finishes racing at 4 or 5 years old or 3 years old, because there's just so much more time for them to be successful. And, what I say is every off-track thoroughbred that's out there winning in the show ring or in a 3-day event is a great advertising for racing, because the people who are participating in that event and who are watching and paying attention will say, our racing is obviously doing the right thing by its horses, because look how well they're doing in their second careers. Can I say something?
Go ahead, Allie.
I'll be quick. I'm a big fan of eventing, and one of the top events in the world is here in Lexington at the Horse Park. Rolex, probably most people have heard of it. This year, 11 of the top 20 placing horses were ex-race horses, many of which came off of our tracks, a lot of canter tracks, and a couple like Finger Lakes, a couple of the other tracks with programs. So there is absolutely a market for thoroughbred racehorses, but they have to come off the track sound. That's our biggest problem. Injecting a joint and running a horse one last time might come off the track sound for the trainer. It's not going to be sound to hold up for a second career. So I really would like to stress, tying this whole summit together, the uniformity of drug rules. That I know you can't legislate morality, but you know, you can certainly push some ethics on people that injecting a horse's knee when it has chips to run it a second and third time after it, you know, nearly broke down is, we cannot do anything to help that horse. That horse is never going to run around Rolex, much less a field if it continues. So just wanted to say that.
So that would be your answer to my following question. What can the racing industry do differently to make it an easier process, getting horses from the racetrack to second careers?
Protect them on the track, protect them from breaking down. I saw such cool presentations here today about keeping horses safe on the track, but we need to also ensure that they're safe off the track, and the research and the drug testing needs to be, a decision needs to be made, and rules need to be put in place, and these horses cannot continue to be injected like they are and subjected to what they're subjected to. It's flat out abuse a lot of the times, and we're left cleaning up the mess, and it's heartbreaking.
Barbara?
I think I see a lot of this from being based at the racetrack, and it was very heartwarming to hear everyone here today talk about, especially the trainer licensing. I think that has a large part to do with how these horses end up in the situations that they are. I know at Philadelphia Park we do offer the Groom Elite program. It's going to start up in July, and I'm happy to say that when we had it 2 years ago, there were quite a number of grooms that went through the program, and hopefully they learned a lot about how to take care of these horses. I am a big fan of horse racing, but I also think that the education part of it will go a long way. But I also think that these days, because the public eye is so much on horse racing, there's always bad publicity when a horse runs through one of the livestock auctions. And as a racetrack, we set up a zero tolerance policy that the trainers aren't allowed to send those horses to an auction where they may end up going to slaughter. But at the same time, I question myself every once in a while, well then, are we sitting at Philadelphia Park Racetrack and allowing these trainers or enabling them to be able to race their horses so hard, but knowing that we're there to pick them up? I do have to say, and I am 50-50 on this. I have had a lot of occasions where trainers have come to me, and I admit I'm an old softy, and they've, you know, said, well, they have 5 horses or 3 horses, they need to stall, can you hurry up and take my horse? And when I say that, apologize to them for the waiting list, there have been a few of them who say, oh, don't worry about it, we're willing to keep this horse as long as we can here because we know that you guys will take care of them and we're not going to race them anymore. But then there are other trainers who say, well, I'm going to race them until you can take them then if you have your waiting list. And I don't know what to say to that. I mean, we try to do the right thing for these animals, and it's a heartbreaking business, but I do feel like we're making some kind of inroads into it, but we do have to have the cooperation, the education, and everything that everyone talked about here today to back this up so our job can be made a little bit easier and a little bit fairer, I think.
Diana?
I think what racing can do is implement more funding programs so that there is less discussion constantly about charitable organizations having to raise money to feed these horses that, you know, have essentially been dumped after racing. You know, we care for some horses that earn 5, 6, you know, over $1 million while they were racing, and they're not sound enough to be riding horses for people, but they certainly deserve to have a great retirement especially when they've earned that much money. And so if there were more programs, we, you know, benefit from the Jockey Club Checkoff program, which has been amazing for us, and other racetracks that have funding programs that support the TRF. And it enables us to concentrate. We have a volunteer board that works extremely hard, and we're totally dependent on charitable donations. We could spend more time raising money and talking about the great programs that these horses can do and how these horses can give back to society if we weren't, you know, always, like so many organizations, just trying to raise money to feed the horses.
Dr. Smith?
I just want to echo what the last 3 have said. Our executive director has good contacts at all three of the racetracks in Kentucky, and she says over and over again, what can we do to get the trainer owner to not get that last race in there so that we have a horse that's salvageable and can be retrained. It's that very same thing that everyone else has said. That would do more than a lot of other things.
Kim, you want to add anything?
One thing that would help us tremendously, and Dr. Smith, you might have some insight into this, is in the show world, they are not often faced with the type of injuries that these horses get in the race world. And the trainers, the prospective buyers and adopters are a bit confused by a lot of the injuries that we have on the horses that come in. And if there was some sort of, even just a pamphlet or something developed that would kind of help give some insight into what sort of injuries can usually, and I know it's always case-by-case basis, but what sort of injuries can usually still go on to be competitive given enough time, or what as usually, career ending, or what that would be helpful for us. I know, like I said earlier, 40% of bows usually rebow, and that is in a racing environment with all-out pressure. I wonder, for a trail horse or a riding horse, is a horse that had a 30% tear likely to re-injure himself on a normal trail ride? Not Man from Snowy River, but just, average trail riding incident, to kind of help guide programs into correctly placing their horses. I know in the world of eventing, some knee chips and so forth can be somewhat minor if the chip is the right type, a non-displaced chip, or because usually the horses are trained to carry themselves from behind with their weight on if they're done correctly on their hind end, whereas hocks can be very problematic. So something like that would be very helpful for our program in educating our adopters, because besides fundraising, being an adoption counselor basically is what the most of our time is spent on, educating our adopters on how to properly socialize these horses into their existing situations. And that would help, I think, alleviate some of their hesitations on injuries and knowing what might work for them.
Okay, I'm going to ask each member of the group, this might be our last question, so if you were to, I'm going to start down with you, if you were to start your track or horseman's group and you were to start a program today, what is that one key aspect of it that you would use to make sure it started on the right foot?
I don't think you can answer that in one key thing, but I'll try to fold it all into one. I think that cooperation among the horsemen, the owners, the trainers, the racing management, the track owners is imperative, and they need to, and actually the track veterinarians. It needs to encompass the entire thing, just like the injury database. Obviously that works because everybody is participating. The only way for programs to work and for programs to be implemented and be successful is for it to be implemented wholeheartedly at each racetrack. And I think that's the most important part. You can't go in and half-ass it.
Barbara?
Funding is everything. I know that we all know how much it costs to take care of a racehorse, and I think the success of Turning for Home right off the bat was that we had our funding all set in place. So the worst that would happen was that I have a budget every month for the amount that we've set up to be promised every month, and obviously there's more fundraising that can be done. And speaking of fundraising, I think from what I've learned from my volunteers, who are a great group, that thinking outside the box and not doing your traditional fundraisers is the way to go. If you can get people outside the horse industry to support you, there are a lot of people out there with disposable income that I don't know why, I don't understand it myself, because I don't have too many checks to write to just anybody I see on TV, but there are a lot of people who will send you that money if you can get to them and present it the right way.
And I would say don't let the tail wag the dog. So if the racetrack and the horsemen are going to get everybody together and get the funding together, then they need to control how the money is spent and control the story and the good publicity. I've seen a couple situations where the tracks have gotten together a small fund and not enough money, and just sort of given donations to local charities, but not really worked with them about how many horses they would be taking and what would be done with those horses. And it's kind of come back in their face now because it wasn't enough money for the number of horses that were placed, and now the charities are out basically bad-mouthing the track, saying you didn't come up with enough money. There's so many horses that still need to be rescued. And every time that there's a charity out there saying we need this money, you just keep raising the issue over and over again. Obviously, racing's not taking care of its horses because look at how many charities are having to do it for them. And I think racing needs to get control over that.
Dr. Smith?
I guess my answer would be pretty short, but I think the biggest thing that we would probably do differently would be to try to emphasize retraining more from the start, because we did not get into retraining at all until early this year, and we have had no trouble whatsoever adopting out the first horses that have gone through it. And people are always looking, even non-thoroughbreds, regardless, if you can get a horse that is going to be a good riding horse or whatever, or you know, able to compete in any type of event, why I think that that's going to increase the number of horses you can take. We don't have a charge for horses that we adopt out. We ask for a donation, but it's usually only several $100s. But I think that we would adopt out and save a lot more horses if they went out retrained.
Thank you. And Kim?
Well, one thing that probably is most in my mind that we would like to see implemented would be what I spoke of earlier, a liaison at the racetracks or at the training centers that can work with the horsemen and the horse owners, that can educate them on the possibilities for their horses and get those horses timely transitioned into a program, and having the material to do that, and of course that comes down to funding. But I think that a vast majority of owners, and from what we've seen, given the opportunity that if they have a connection there, will choose to do the right thing. And you know, it costs probably about, on average, $1,400 per horse that goes through our retraining program. And I think with an $80 day rate, most owners would gladly ride over that $1,400 check and know that their horse is in good hands and will have a career for the rest of his life, a skill set to fall back on. So I think just getting someone there at the track that can give the resources to the trainers and the owners so they can make their decisions and let them know what their choices are, and then helping them implement those choices would be what I'd suggest.
Great, thank you. Well, I would like to close and say thank you to the panelists, and hopefully when we sit down tomorrow we can come up with some concrete recommendations to bring back to the industry. Appreciate everybody's help today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's program. For those of you who are participants, please come to dinner tonight at 6 o'clock at the clubhouse over in the main building. Probably good to wear your tags so we can all know each other. The behind closed doors sessions will start tomorrow at 8 o'clock with opening remarks. We'll just go right on over into the Limestone Cafe. And then at 11 o'clock, the public is welcome to come back to the final session, which is on implementation, of trying to figure out how we can get ideas acted upon. Thank you very much.